Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a fantastic day. And we're just coming back from our 2 days off that we had, so hopefully you didn't miss us too much. That on top of the weekend means that it's been quite a while since we got to talk to everyone. So again, I hope everyone out there is doing great. Not too much productivity was lost with everything that's been going on. But happy that you could join us. So today on the program, if you have not had the privilege of hearing from our correspondent, Mr. Dariush Derakhshani, then you are in luck because we have a lot to cover, a lot to talk about. And, today's all about graphics and everything about CGI, graphics, anything, kind of hardware related as well. We do a lot of that, and kind of our chance to hear about what's latest and greatest, and just cool things. Because let's face it, when it comes to CGI, we're fast heading into a future where, we already look at photos and we go, well, is that photoshopped? And we look at movies and go, well, is that CGI? And, we're fast heading into a world where that's getting harder and harder to recognize. So not saying that he's like the, Computer America's FBI, but he's Computer America's FBI. So everyone, welcome into Computer America. Before we get started, a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes. So any articles, videos, any products that we talk about, everything will be included right there at our homepage, as well as a link to our guest website. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and check out the live video feed, which is brought to you by OWC. So all that and more at Computer America. And why don't we go ahead and get started with our guests. So once again, Dariush Derakhshani joins us. And Dariush, how you doing? Welcome onto Computer America.
Hey, it's always good to be on. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we hear you loud and clear. So let's, So before we get started, let's tell everyone about your background. Kind of what qualifies you to come here on Computer America.
I've been in CG as a CG supervisor, or a VFX supervisor, visual effects supervisor for quite some time now, and build my own computers to make workstations, and been doing that. Gosh, I think my first computer I put together was a 286, like 30 years ago, give or take. So I've been doing this for a couple of days.
Yeah, no, it certainly sounds like it. And I, just because I, my age and what I know of technology, whenever someone says that, I worked on, a 286 or something like that, like if I don't have knowledge of it, I just go, it was probably the mid to late 80s, early 90s. That's luckily I'm coming just on the tail end of technology, or just at the beginning of technology. So that's where I come from. But anyways, and of course you are a regular here on the program, and we appreciate that. So let's go ahead and get talking about some of these topics, because you've picked out a number of them, and they're everything from hardware to the latest in CGI kind of stuff. And did you have one in particular that really caught your attention?
That's a good question. There's quite a few going on. I'm just going to go down from the top to the bottom.
Sure.
And that's, I've been seeing a lot more of the external breakaway boxes that are Thunderbolt capable. So you can hook up your laptop to, a Titan X card, or to some really heavy hitting PCI card. So you don't necessarily need a big workstation anymore. You can have a laptop And if you plug into one of these breakaway boxes, you could have like a massive video card working for you.
Yeah, and just real quick, it's I've said this about a number of different things, but about computers, like we're getting to the point where we have external GPUs, external. I've seen external RAM holders, I've seen external everything, and I'm afraid that we're going to get to a point where it's like you have your laptop and you have like an external. You have like an external motherboard with an external processor with an external RAM, GPU, external cooling, everything like that. And then someone's going to have the bright idea to put it all in one case and call it a desktop. Yeah. It seems like we're kind of hitting to that point, but at the same time, if you could talk real quick about, external GPUs are not the most popular thing in the world. I wouldn't ask you to explain a monitor, but explain external GPU and why those are even necessary in the first place.
Well, basically, it's like a little tiny PC. It's a little box that'll house. It's got a power supply and a little, I guess not a motherboard, but like a daughter card where you've got PCIe slots. One or two of them where you can plug in a beefy card. It doesn't have to be a GPU, but that's probably the main use for it. So you can plug in a GeForce 1080i or a Titan X or something like that into this thing, and then there's a Thunderbolt 3 connection to your laptop. So if your laptop's Thunderbolt, the bandwidth in that connection gives you a really good ability. Basically, I think what you were saying before, the future of a PC, I would love to see a desktop machine that's got a detachable laptop or a detachable notebook where you can unplug it from your desktop and take it with you, and you have all your stuff on there, and you've got maybe a lower performing processor or a GPU, but it's still your desktop experience, you know?
And we've seen, or we've started to see products like that. I'm sure that they're kind of niche, but they're getting more popular, and it's kind of like a dock. It's kind of like a dock, where you would have your laptop, you'd set it down, you had everything, kind of wired up at your workstation, and you set your laptop down with its giant 17-inch laptop screen, and then when you need to go, you unplug it from the dock and you just leave half your hardware there. That's certainly possible.
Yeah, especially if it ends up being like a tablet that you can undock. I mean, the docking stations have been around for almost as long as laptops have been around, and they usually just give you more peripheral, so you can plug into external monitor and mouse and keyboard and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Now what we're seeing is much more capability being added to your laptop. So again, you can have a massive GPU hooked up to your little dinky, and I say dinky with love, your little dinky laptop, MacBook or Dell or HP or whatever it might be, can really harness a lot more power when you plug into this thing. I think one thing for the near future for the mass market or even the hobbyist market would be to have a desktop that's got a touchscreen capable tablet or laptop that you can literally just pop out and take it with you. And with cloud computing, that's going to be even more accessible because you can have your desktop experience and all your files and everything being streamed to you. So that little unit could be ever so streamlined.
Right. Yeah, and I guess a lot of these bottlenecks that are keeping us from doing this in the here and now, and one of them is the rate of data. But everyone seems to be clamoring over Thunderbolt 3. I think mainly it's been used by Apple. It's kind of one of Apple's standards. But Thunderbolt 3, I'm seeing it on more PC motherboards and things like that. I mean, is Thunderbolt 3 really that big of a deal when it comes to these kinds of uses?
It is right now because it's probably one of the better throughputs basically, and the differences between Thunderbolt 3 and USB Type-C it isn't that much. So USB-C is also the sort of a take it in
Well,
to your laptop as well.
just for my own sake, USB-C, but also USB 3.1 would be
Hmm.
more comparable to three. But even then, and I'm sure I pulled up a chart that looks a lot like maybe the one that you pulled up. But when it comes to data transfer rate, USB 3.1, which is the latest greatest USB standard, has
Hmm.
the same data transfer rate as Thunderbolt 1. Thunderbolt 3 has about 4 times. So it can do about 40 gigabits per second, which is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, those are peak performances. I think throughput USB-C is going to be that's going to be the capable bandwidth. Let me put it this way: the bandwidth for USB-C will become more capable,
Hmm.
and hopefully will catch up to that kind of speed. But right now, especially with really heavy GPU usage, it is a Thunderbolt 3 connectivity right now for these external boxes. But like I said, I think USB-C will open up the capability to non-MacBook.
Right.
But like you were saying, PCs are starting to adopt the Thunderbolt 3 paradigm as well.
Right. It's just whatever is going to work best for for
Hmm.
data transfer. And for right now, I don't know what it is about Thunderbolt, but they really have it. And that's kind of USB-C. USB-C, USB 3.1. It's one of the main hangups that it's going to have includes the fact that how do you put it? USB also has to work as a charging standard. Like you also have to be able to charge devices off of these. That's something that Thunderbolt really isn't known for. It's not really meant to charge up a cell phone in 45 minutes.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think Thunderbolt does carry some power with it as well. It's all really
Right.
really complicated, but I think in the end they're actually the same connector, aren't they?
They're close. They're
Yeah.
certainly close. But for right now, it is what it is. So there's that one, and I think I also wanted to kind of daisy chain, Blackmagic's eGPU, which by the way, more and more are doing this. I think one of our sponsors, OWC, they were just showing off one of theirs that they're coming out with as well. So we're definitely seeing a lot of, kind of external GPUs. And then there was also one from Apple that we're going to touch on right after this. But the story I wanted to get to before we do that is from the same publication, CGW, but about Dell and their entry level kind of workstation. And why this kind of fits together. I assume that if you wanted to take maybe an entry level precision workstation and turn it into something a
Mhm.
little bit stronger, you would get an eGPU like we were just talking about and be able to, and that would be, I think, a lot of people's first uh, entry into, kind of workstations and expanding them. So if you don't mind, Dell debuts entry level precision workstations.
They've got there's a new Xeon chip from Intel. I think it's called the Xeon E, which is more of a entry level workstation class chip. Just a brief background, comparing Intel chips like the i7, i5 to
I
the
have a
Xeon.
bone, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I have a bone to
Mhm.
pick with Intel. And I'm going to ask you, did you see what happened with the Intel 7, the Intel i7? I want to say it's like the 7980 or something K, like their latest and greatest i7 chip. Did you see what was kind of quote
No,
unquote
no, I
leaked?
didn't. Yeah, I did
Uh,
not actually.
this is something that I covered for like 20 minutes because I read the article and I was a little miffed, but it pertains to the fact that I'm sure that you being in the field, you kind of understand Intel's wonky naming scheme, where the i7, and especially those that end in K, they're kind of they're higher level. They are right, yeah, they're unlocked, and they are traditionally 8-core, 16 thread. That is what the i7 kind of denoted. Well,
Right.
their next generation i7, by all accounts, and so far what's been kind of leaked about them already, is that the latest i7 highest one will only be 8 core, 8 thread, no hyper-threading whatsoever.
For the
And
i7
for the
hyper-threading?
i7. But then they're introducing a new i9 chip, which will be i9. And again, if you kind of know their naming scheme, their i9 was placed between the i7 and the Xeon chips, where they would have
Right,
like 10 core, 20 thread or something like that.
right, right.
Well, they're putting in a new i9, and it's going to be 8 core, 16 thread. So it's essentially they're turning one of
This
their i7s into an i9s and devaluing the i7. But here's the thing: the latest i7 is going to be the same price as every other top end i7, and then the
Oh, wow.
i9, which is the i7, turned into $100 more expensive than the previous generation.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a bone I would have to pick as well. That's pretty discouraging because that was the distinction mostly between the i5 and the i7 is the hyper-threading ability of
Mm-hmm.
the i7. So if they're essentially bumping it up to the i9 and removing it from the i7, this is basically just a price increase.
Yeah, it's definitely a marketing thing. It's a price
Mhm.
increase for kind of higher end, and I think it's like in a lot of ways it makes the i9 like whatever is designated an i9 that makes it the best of the best that Intel's going to have to offer.
Right.
But it
That's
throws out
sad.
yeah, but it throws out kind of convention. It throws out what we know, and between these new Intel Xeon E processors and the i9s, it muddies the water for Intel a little bit more. Like there's a clear step up, from i5 to i7 to i9 to Xeon, but it's a bit more confusing, and they're charging a little bit more. So if nothing else, I think to me, first of all, I don't like relearning things, things that I thought I knew,
Right. Yeah.
and the second thing is it kind of makes AMD because if people look at the best i7, which I think they're traditionally kind of that's the best consumer, not hobbyist, but consumer. Now they're going to
Mhm.
look at AMD and go, these are more competitive than ever.
Yeah, especially for the price points as well. I think that's I hope they reverse this. I hope this information is misleaked
Right.
because they're just shooting the i7 in the
If
foot.
if nothing else, it shows that by taking away the hyperthreading from the highest i7, that's a very
Mhm.
clear distinction between AMD because AMD has been showing off their bulldozer, they're like 16
Yeah.
core, 32 thread, or even I think they have like a 20 core, 40 thread. I think they released at some point. Like it's Intel clearly stating hyperthreading is not really something consumers want. And I think that's starting to change though.
Yeah, no, I completely disagree with that assessment and that people don't want hyperthreading. I mean, the more headroom in processing is the number of cores. It's in parallel computing. The more you throw at it, the more you get to it. And that's why GPU processing is becoming so much more popular. It's because a GPU has a lot more processing threads on it or cores on it than does a CPU.
Mm-hmm.
So this to me seems like a step backwards. And it's true, we've talked about this before. We do wish more applications, more games specifically, will take advantage of more cores than they do now. But honestly, it's only so fast a gigahertz count we're going to get. We're seeing
Right.
a lot of tapping out at the 4 gigahertz barrier has been really hard to kind of breach and has taken a
The
really long time.
the latest Intel processors I was just talking about, the highest i7 without the hyperthreading just barely cracked the 5 gigahertz. Uh, uh, I'm sorry, 5 gigahertz overclocking. So they finally hit
Overclocking,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Oh,
But what's the stock speed on that?
the standard core speed, I think for a lot of these was like 3 point. No. It was like 4.3 or 4.4. I don't quite recall. And then it can be overclocked to
Yeah,
5.
yeah. The low fours is where things have been hovering
Right.
for quite a while. I mean, I got my 6700K what, about 2.5 years ago at this point. It's a Skylake i7. And that I got it because it had just cracked 4.0.
Hmm.
And it's been a couple of processor generations. And, just to see 4.2, 4.3, that I hope makes my point. There's only so fast that we're going to get these clock rates, and the power in a CPU. Really, I think there's much more headroom in parallel processing,
Well,
having a lot
yeah.
of cores, having a lot of threads, and having your software and your OS be able to address all those cores and threads. And in a lot of cases, that's where the Xeon comes in. And we were talking about the distinctions between the i7 and the Xeon, and that's one of them. They tend to have more cores, and you can have multi-processors
Hmm.
on a motherboard where you can't really do that with the i7s. You can do that with the Xeons. So that's one requirement that professionals have is give me more cores, give me more processing.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why it's exciting to see a more uh, cheap being a low cost. That's a much better
There
word.
we go.
A lower cost entry level Xeon, because I get a lot of students and I get a lot of people looking to get into this line of work asking, what should I get? What should I get? And yeah, it's true. You can get a good gaming laptop or a gaming machine and do really well with it. But if you want to mirror what a studio or facility will have, they typically will go for a workstation class machine, which I guess puts more of an emphasis on stability than it does on raw power. We can talk about GPUs in that way as well. The Xeons, they have error correcting RAM access as well as a bigger on-die cache, the L3 cache.
Hmm.
So that makes things faster, but it also can make things more stable. Your memory, your run speed on the memory is typically slower on a workstation because of this, but you know that it's a more mission critical. Your data is not going to corrupt as easily as it might on just a run in the mill or gaming PC memory.
It's
So that's
yeah,
where the Xeons are coming from. But
yeah.
there's quite a bit of a price premium to getting a Xeon machine or a workstation machine. So I'm glad to see these entry level setups from Dell and based on the Xeon E entry level chips now. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and just a couple of things. I mean, that's the reason that you just gave is the same reason why I don't drool over, like, let's say the Titan V as opposed to the Titan XP from NVIDIA, is that
Mhm.
the Titan V for even though it's almost two times as expensive as a Titan XP, um, it's not twice as fast. It's just, twice as, kind of stable or, does that, has that redundancy. So it can do kind of your processes of, rendering things
Mhm.
much faster than, than a graphics card would. But all right, so the entry level Xeon processors, Xeon E, I mean, do you know anything about, kind of how they compare to, some kind of consumer model? Like these are going to have obviously hyper-threading. That's a must-have. Lots of PCIe lanes so that you can hook up a lot of storage and things like that. I mean, what really stands out, and do we also have price points as well for these things?
Well, the Xeons, the major factors we kind of already talked about with why they'd be considered for a machine over an i7.
Right.
One of the one of the other things is they do have hyperthreading now that looks like the i7 might not in the future. But they also work for longer. They're more stable and they can handle a heavier load much better than a consumer level CPU does. So those are the things that workstation people look for is the longevity because when you've got a studio full of 20, 30 artists working for you, you don't want to be constantly servicing or swapping out their machines. You just want it to sit there and go.
Right.
And I think that's really important. I don't know if that's important for the casual sort of hobbyist type person or the student looking to get into it. I don't know if it's quite that important, but it sure does make a lot of sense for small boutiques and studios looking to ramp up or looking for a few machines for artists to work on.
And even in the same vein, just because I feel like we're just talking about processors at this point, we can also touch quickly on. I think I may have sent it to you. I have to look it up real quick, but it was AMD's $2,000 processor, and I'm trying to find out which processor it was. But this thing is like if you want hyperthreading, it's it is the one that you really want. Let's see. I think it's like $1,800 or $1,900. Like it competes even with Intel's top of the top Xeon processor. And I'm trying to find exactly which one it actually. I don't think it's the 1950X. It's the man. I'll have to find it in just a second. But essentially, as far as these things go, what are the benefits of kind of going entry level versus really just saying, if I'm going to get a machine, I want something with some real horsepower and I'm not going to skimp on my processor. What are the benefits of really kind of going all in on a processor?
You have a lot of compute power. You'll be able to render faster. You'll be able to process faster. I mean, you can look at an Intel Xeon with 10 cores for like, what is it, about $3,000. Or you can look at the entry-level Xeon E that's about $350 to $400. That's got 6 cores on it. So, the range of options could be a little bit confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to you want to buy the best machine you can for the money.
Right.
If you're a student or an artist looking for a personal machine to kind of work on CG and stuff like that, whether you get a good i7 or i9 versus a Xeon, I think that comes to what you can stomach as far as cost, because the Xeon's going to cost you a little bit more because the Xeon will be a little bit slower. Like, for example, there's a $500 Xeon E5. It's got 8 cores, but they're running at 3.1 gigahertz, and you can probably get an i9 that's around the same price, or an i7 around the same price with faster clock speed. But you also have to consider that ECC, or error correcting memory, is more expensive and a little bit slower than regular memory as well as the motherboard is also a little bit more expensive for Xeons. They're all built to be more stable, to last longer, to give you a more secure sort of experience when you're working with this kind of stuff. If you're building a machine, like I said, to be budget conscious, but you want to get the best for your money, you may be looking at an i7 or an i9. But if money's not an issue, then you're looking at spending $2,000-$3,000 on a CPU,
right?
Possibly getting a couple of them and a motherboard that can run that stuff, and you're looking at workstations that are $10,000 to $15,000 at that point.
Right, and by the way, I found it. It was the AMD Ryzen Threadripper, the 2990W, and it has 32 cores, 64 thread on a single processor. So, yeah, there's.
And then what's the price point on that? Do you have that up?
I think that's $17.99 or $18.99. Let's see, get yours. Let's hit the buy button. Let's go ahead and shop at Newegg because why not? And. Yeah, $17.99 is for the whole thing, so $1,800.
Yeah,
So,
it's. I think all of this sort of dancing that Intel's been doing with their naming. I mean, the whole i9 platform came up because of the Ryzen.
Yeah.
And AMD stepping in and starting to punch much better at its weight class. So it's, as I mentioned, we talked about this a while ago when the Ryzen was just coming out. I was more excited to see competition and a little fire being lit. I hope, like I said,
well, and actually, we're gonna stop right there. There's music playing in the background. So everyone, Dariush Derakhshani, Computer America, more as soon as we come back. Everyone, stay tuned.
Awesome.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And there we go. Welcome back to the Computer America Show, where mute buttons are hard and tricky. We are 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And yeah, we're talking with Dariush Derakhshani. By the way, before we get back to it, if you missed any part of today's program, feel free to check out the podcast. It is essentially today's show in its entirety, wherever podcasts are found. So you can take us on the go, time shift us, however you feel you best want to listen to Computer America. But hey, as we've been doing, we are, of course, live on the IRN radio network, and we are here, talking with Dariush. So Dariush, before we, kind of skip over, wrap up the Dell thing and the processor thing, I wanted your, final thoughts on, the reason that, we're even talking about threads and cores as they kind of relate to people, because I believe you're getting to the point that, Intel really has not been making it a priority to give people parallel computing, whereas that's what kind of brought AMD back into, some sort of competitiveness, is that, hey, that's what they do.
A lot of cores. Yeah, no, I think they angled it pretty well. Now, and on the other side of the coin is there's not a ton of software that can take advantage of multiple cores. I mean, the workstation applications that I use, still a lot of their functions only rely on one core, only hit one core. So I've got a few cores just sitting there idle while it's processing this one tool or function in my animation package. And then when I hit other things like rendering and things like that, that's when it really uses the full bandwidth of the CPU. So I think the applications need to catch up to being able to use a lot of cores. Like video editing has come a long way in being able to use a lot of cores and encoding, decoding video. So that's great. But I think games and other things can definitely catch up to multi-core performance first. So, it's sort of like chicken and the egg, which one's coming first? But either way you look at it, these Ryzen CPUs, the Threadrippers and such are really they're lighting a fire under all of the CPU movement. So I'm hoping what Intel puts out is going to be,
You know,
you know,
and I kind of feel like a lot of applications, for better or worse, I feel like they're still designed with like an Intel like Pentium 4 in mind, where you can only rely on the consumer having access to maybe 2 cores, maybe 4 cores. If they're, if they're really into computers, they're gonna have 4 cores. But I think if the average consumer out there had the ability to get a 16-core, 32-thread processor, or at least the people designing their software knew that they could rely on the average person or the average user having multiple threads, multiple cores, then they could design applications that could utilize more cores. Right now, it's just when you're designing, do you want to say, all right, we're going to be able to take up 16 threads. Yeah. That's going to be our thing, and then everyone out there is going, your application isn't really optimized for my four thread computer. You're right. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, but it's a chicken and egg that you can't really blame Intel for. It's more, hey, are we craving this? And if people get more cores and hyperthreading, then more applications will utilize more cores and hyperthreading. And then Intel will say, oh, look, we actually need to design these things with more hyperthreading. And yeah, so it's something that I think the consumer can really voice by making it a priority for them.
Yeah. And I think Intel answers that by distinguishing the I series with the Xeon series, where the Xeons do have a ton of cores and a lot of threads where the I's don't. So I think that's sort of the dividing line. But the Xeons also come with the error correcting memory and more stable and durable performance.
Right.
So that's sort of where that line is drawn.
So and with all that being said about processors, and we talked a bit about GPUs, talk about, again, circling way back to Dell and their new entry-level precision workstations. I mean, you were just saying that when you have students who want to come up and build their own workstations for whatever reason, maybe they're doing it as like a side gig or something, entry level, you made it sound like you would rather have people put together their own kind of workstations. Is there a market for pre-built, kind of entry level workstations?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Okay.
absolutely. If unless you're into computers like we are, I think building a machine is probably not going to be something high up on your list of things to do. If you want to focus on just CG or art or digital workflows and videos and stuff like that, you probably don't want to get into building your own machine and then maintaining your own machine. So there's a lot of good places to get workstations, and most makers like Dell, HP, Box, to name just a couple, have a pretty good lineup of machines. Some that even have the i7 or i9 chips in them, but with workstation graphics and stuff like that. But like I said, I think with the new Xeon E, and there's a new naming structure with the Xeon, so E is now the new designation for all the entry level, where before it used to be the E3. So the Xeon E's are the entry level, and the Xeon W's are more the full-on, more expensive machines. So the Xeon E's in Dell's Precisions, if you get the E version, again, you're going to have a machine that's gonna last. It's going to keep going. Same thing if you get a Xeon E in any of the other makers, the Lenovo's or the HP's or the Boxes. I think, honestly, more and more, I just had a Facebook discussion with somebody who reached out to me. They're a student, they're getting into visual effects. They want a laptop. And I think more and more people are going to be wanting to do this kind of work on laptops. And the advice I ended up giving them is they were looking at a machine that had more power versus a machine that had a better color monitor screen.
Oh, okay.
And that brought up a really good thought in my mind, is like, again, you want to get the best laptop that you can. But if you're working in digital art and digital imaging, screen is very important. So what I ended up telling them, if you can also get an external monitor that you can do most of your mission critical, color critical work, then it doesn't matter if your screen is only 72% of the sRGB color range or gamut, because you can do all your work on a nice, like a HP Dreamcolor 10-bit, or like I have a BenQ 10-bit screen that are color accurate. You can do that very easily, and then when you need to take off to class or whatever, you can bring your laptop with you. I think that is even bolstered more by the fact that there are eGPUs out there. You can get a breakout box, plug in at your desk, and now you've got a much more powerful machine at your desk than you do on the road. So you don't necessarily need to get a very beefy $3,000-$4,000 laptop anymore. You can get a modest $1,000 gaming laptop that turns into a monster workstation when you get home. So the options and the choices are really at a point of almost confusion.
Yeah.
To some point. There's so many choices, and it comes down to your budget, your time frame, and your personal preferences and your brand preferences. I don't have a particular brand preference. I've been impressed for many years, as long as I've been reviewing machines by Dell and Precision for a super long time, but I've also been a little bit disappointed with some of their Precision machines as well. But I've been also very impressed with HP and with Lenovo as well.
The
So
and I mean, the only thing that I would kind of advise, kind of against is technology. When it comes right down to it, I really don't have a preference either. No one's really paid me yet to for me to give you a preference, but I will say that I don't trust very easily of brand names that I haven't heard about. And it's not saying that, what these technology companies are doing is impossible, is magic, is that they have their summoning circle in the basement of their lobby and they're just, doing the whole, kind of creepy thing with it. It's more to the fact that technology has no has no margin for profit. There's nowhere to make money. Everything is, razor thin from RAM, CPU, manufacturing. And for a new company, not an established company, but for a new company to come in, have all the costs of startup, have all the costs to, distribute, manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. Either, like, if they don't hit that price point, that's going to be above the established people. Like, if they're the same price, but I've never heard of them, they're cutting costs somewhere, and that's either using lower quality computer components or assembling in places that probably don't treat your computers very nicely. I mean, if I haven't heard of them, that's the only thing I would kind of tend to avoid, just personally. Is if I haven't heard of their brand name, it means that there's and again, they don't meet that price point. There's something off there.
Yeah, quite possibly. One of the things this person reached out to me about was my review of the MSI mobile workstation a while back. He read.
I remember that.
I think we talked about this machine
we did.
A little bit on this as well. He really liked that machine. It had a better screen. His question to me was, how is it still doing? What's the long-term sort of evaluation? And unfortunately, with review units, you don't get to keep them for very long.
Right.
Back in the day, sometimes, I would have a Dell or an HP for a really long time. And I've come to really, really respect. I had one of the first workstation Precisions I got was many years ago. I had that thing for a really long time. And that thing was a beast. It never, ever, ever failed on me. And that's the sort of review, that's the sort of news people want to hear about workstations. What is its durability? How long will it last? How long can I rely on this machine? And, like you were saying, profit margins are super thin, and a lot of PC makers, they're not able to let review units be out for several months or just to give them
yeah,
out for people to have.
and
Yeah.
just being in the industry with you, I know that whenever we sign up to do reviews, it's like, all right, it's currently with someone else. You'll get it in 2 weeks. You can have it for 2 to 3 weeks, and then you have to send it back to us so we can like they have like maybe a couple dozen units that they send to everyone, and it's kind of gross, but it happens.
That's the reality of it, and that's a little unfortunate. I mean, people have to tighten their belts all over the place to be able to still make shareholders happy in the stock market. So, in the end, that's one of those things that wasn't the case like 10 years ago, where I would go to a trade show and people would hand you
they throw them at you. They would
video cards.
They would just
write
chuck.
about.
Yeah, they would just chuck computers at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that I really miss. I've had a machine for months before I've made a review on it, and the PR people aren't terribly happy about that. But in the end, that's what people are looking for. They want to know that a workstation is going to sit at their desk for the next 3 years and still be productive and still be dependable. And I've mentioned the precision line. I love the precision line. What Dell has done to that segment of the market has been just outstanding. However, there have been lemons out there. There have been at least one model, to my mind, that never should have been put out. But the HP line and the ThinkStation line from Lenovo as well, they're all really very well respected, but I can't tell you that I've had a Lenovo at my feet for 3 years.
Right.
I can say that about HP. I can say that about Dell. So those are my two go-tos. But that's not to say Lenovo can't last you that long. That's not to say MSI can't last you that long. I just don't have that personal experience with them to be able to say that.
That's something like you're hitting on something that I've heard voiced on online on forums and things like that, where people don't really Google the MSI workstation, like that's just a couple of months ago. Imagine in 2 years, people are not going to be Googling for that particular iteration of the MSI workstation. They're going to be looking up what's being advertised in commercials right now, what's in PC. Do they have PC magazines? Right. Oh, whatever's being marketed at that point, that's what people want to hear about, and that's what they're going to Google. Right. So, like when you say that, hey, I had a computer, it worked great for 3 years. Yeah, not many people are in the market for a 3-year-old computer.
For a 3-year-old computer, exactly.
But just knowing that it has longevity, though,
right. It's the brand and it's the line that really it's sort of having a reputation. When people hire me, they know that what I come with because I have a reputation. It's the same thing with the Dell Precision line. Like I wouldn't necessarily recommend people buy Dell Latitude, for their workstation need. But I would say I know the Precisions, and they are by far very dependable and very reliable because I've had a lot of experience professionally as well as a reviewer with them. So that's sort of what needs to get built. So, with MSI and their workstation laptop and their VR ready laptop, I mean, really beefy, really great. Looks wonderful, looked like it would hold up, but I don't know unless I've been toting it around for a year that it's, you know what, you can start trusting this line. That's like I can say with Precision and with the Z books from HP, for example.
Right. That's one thing that I wish that I could change. We were reviewing, and this, not as complicated, obviously, as a computer, but we were just reviewing, phone cases. And there was a phone case. Let's see, we did a review for, it was not OtterBox. It was someone else, but they had, the review is still up, and I still have it up because, at the time, it's what I really thought of it. But I'd say and it was waterproof and all that kind of thing. I'd say about 4 months after the review came out, we tested it for like a month, and then a month or 4 months later, I'm still using it, and in my personal life, and it started to break. Like it started to fall apart. The glue started to come off.
Wow.
And it's like at that point, I went back, I did like a little update, a little footnote saying that 4 months afterwards, this thing did not hold up to everyday life. But, the traffic to that article really just wasn't there. The traffic peaked, and then the traffic, of course, tapers off. And it's like, you can do updates, but I wish more people would come back and add to their reviews after a certain amount of time. But that's a whole other thing.
No,
So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a laptop I reviewed a while ago where I went back and updated it because it fell apart after a while and started being hinky. And so I agree with you. I wish that would happen more often.
Yeah. So, okay. So there's that. And by the way, I also, since you were last on, Apple came out with their MacBook Pro. And, this kind of ties in with almost everything we've been talking about. First of all, that's one reason why Apple has the reputation that they do, that they are more expensive. But at the same time, I've heard of people keeping their iMacs for 6, 7, 8 years, as opposed to a lot of people who, throw theirs away after 2 years. Apple has reliability on their side. That's, they're expensive, but some people really justify the cost. Their latest MacBook Pro just came out. Oh, and sorry.
Yeah, I've had a chance to benchmark the iMac Pro as well, and compared to some other PC desktops, and this is like a $7,000-8,000 iMac Pro.
Yeah.
Compared to about a $6,000 or $7,000 PC, it really held up its own.
Yeah, it's and one thing I wanted to get to was the MacBook Pro, the latest iteration. They, way at the beginning of today's show, if you recall, we were talking about external GPUs or eGPU.
Yep.
And this iteration of the MacBook Pro is the first time Apple is selling, kind of quote unquote, a peripheral where you can actually buy an eGPU for a MacBook Pro. And I thought, hey, if Apple's doing it, that must mean that, more and more people are demanding more of their laptops and these kinds of things. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good sign. They're pushing their Blackmagic eGPU, which is basically the same sort of thing as the breakaway box I was talking about. And one of the makers is Sonnet. They've had a breakaway box for graphic cards for a while. These are really, really useful for editors and colorists and a lot of people that rely on the Mac product line. But it's good to see high-end GPUs coming to that level.
I'm so stupid. I didn't realize that Blackmagic eGPU was was the manufacturer for Apple. I completely did not put the two and two together. That if you buy the one from Apple.com, that one is the Blackmagic eGPU.
Yes,
Okay,
I believe
I
that's
am
how
so
they bundle it.
stupid. Yes.
But you can use other brands
Right.
with them as well, like the Sonnet one as well. You just have to make sure that the card you put in there is going to be compatible with OS X and all that kind of stuff. Where if you get it from Mac, it's already validated to that effect. So you have to do a little bit more homework if you're going to do the non Blackmagic from their website. But yeah,
Right.
that's how they're bundling those.
Right. So at any rate, I think we're going to wrap up there. Try to get one more topic in before the end of today. And we have quite a number here that revolve around kind of NVIDIA. But let's talk about one that you really don't think of. When you think of graphics, you really don't think of Samsung. But in a lot of other areas, Samsung is some of the best. For me, storage. That you can get. When it comes to
Absolutely.
And in fact, I think you and I had that little thing that we did where we both built a computer, and I think we both got Samsung hard drives for our computers. Like it's a very well respected, but when it comes to storage or memory, you don't think graphics. And so Samsung is developing their new GPU. Just real quick, if you could go over this article, and is it for phones? Is it for computers, laptops, tablets? Yeah.
Who knows? We'll see. I think they're focusing a little bit in this part of the market, and I think that's good because their phones have amazing screens. I've had an S8 and I currently have an S9. A beautiful, beautiful phone. Android's got some quirks compared to iOS for sure, but it's gorgeous hardware. It's amazing hardware. So I think if they're going to start developing GPUs that'll run mobile things, I'd like to see if their GPUs are going to start running desktops as well, if they're going to start getting into the AMD NVIDIA fray at all, which I tend to doubt, but you never know which way they're going to go, right?
It's pretty interesting because as much as we're I don't know about you, I can't speak for you, but for myself, I'm a bit of a snob, when it comes to kind of these mobile GPU, mobile CPU kind of chips. But that's probably where the most innovation is currently happening when it comes to processing power, graphics power, is at the lower. I don't even want to say lower end, because you're still paying a whole lot for these things, but in the more compact space. And Apple is coming out with their i10 chipset, I think, for their next iteration of the iPhone. So, they won't be using Intel or Snapdragon or anything like that.
Right.
Like, Apple's going to be coming out with their own CPU, GPU chipset. Samsung seems like, I bet these GPUs are going to be for their tablets and smartphone division more than anything else.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
But yeah,
and
I'm
AI
excited.
as well.
Yeah, and artificial intelligence as well. But I'm excited to see what they can do in the mobile space, even if it doesn't, immediately translate to better GPUs that I can buy for my desktop. I think that the more companies working on the technology behind processing, you're going to see partnerships eventually that will, kind of improve everything. So I'm betting it's going to be for tablets and smartphones when it comes to Samsung GPUs.
Yeah, I agree. And the more we integrate graphics into what we do, VR and AR, I think it's going to be more important. And at some point, is the CPU and the GPU just going to merge together? Like they've had with integrated CPUs, and the GPU that's already on the i7 and the i5 and i3, for example. So is that going to expand, and then you'll have one chip? Who knows?
And I've had this conversation with you in particular, but also with some of my friends, and it's like, there was a time a couple years ago, it's like, why do we even have the CPU? The CPU is so crap compared to the GPU. If we tweak just this and this, we could have everything just in the graphics card. And at the same time, out came, I think, like a couple of innovations from Intel and AMD, and they're like, wow, these things are so great. Why would we ever combine these?
Yeah.
These two can progress at their own speed. And we seem to be, it's like two magnets that are, kind of the same polarity that you're trying to shove together.
Yeah.
Like they just, like you want them to combine, but then they just kind of slip past each other, and they don't ever quite do it. Because whenever I see, the two integrated into each other, I say that's a lower end PC with integrated graphics. I don't ever think of it as a good thing.
I think it comes down to the more specialized a chip can be, the more efficient and powerful it is. Because when you think about it, your network has its own sort of processor, your audio has its own processor, your video, your graphics has its own processor. So the CPU ends up just being the granddaddy coordinator of all these different things. So I think for the highest performance and efficiency, you tend to keep specialized. Integrated CPUs may be good for tablets and less or more mobile machines that require less power.
Right.
So that could be all good, but when you're sitting at your desk, I think the GPU and CPU shouldn't merge. But who am I to say, right?
Well, you are our graphics expert, and I will say that that my last thought on the whole thing is that if you combine them, especially in different form factors, like a phone or a tablet, things that are meant to be compact, small, and mobile, hey, that's where you can really, strike gold there. But in the meantime, everyone, hey, this hour flew on by. And again, I want to thank Dariush Derakhshani for coming on the show and being ever so flexible. And everyone out there, thank you for tuning into Computer America. If you want to find more, Kush 3D, we have that link there. But you can also just, I'm sure, Dariush Derakhshani, quick Google search, and you can find out everything he's been doing lately. So, Dariush, until next time, everyone else, thank you for tuning in. And hey, have a great day. Catch us tomorrow for our all Linux show, where we have our Linux correspondent and we talk everything Linux. We know that you guys are rabid, and if we don't feed you your Linux, you go crazy. So everyone, have a good one. Bye-bye.